In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, Devin McKenna, Nathan Lutz, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights to the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host from right here in Pittsburgh, but socially distanced, Nathan Lutz. How you doing, sir?
I am doing great on this wonderfully cold winter day. How about you?
I'm good. You know where it's probably not cold? The great state of Texas.
That's right.
That's right. We got Ricky Anderson coming to us from Texas and the Flashback Flicks podcast.
Yes. Now, it's cold. It's Texas cold. So I think it's like, what? 60? I don't know.
60? That's delightful. Well, Ricky, for those who didn't catch it, you're from the Flashback Flicks podcast. Your co-host Grayson came back on. I believe the episode was Cool Running. So if
Yes.
people like the movie Cool Runnings and talking about cold weather, check that out. But tell people about your efforts on Flashback Flicks.
Yeah, Flashback Flicks is a podcast that me and my buddy Grayson started back in 2015, and we just wanted an excuse to talk about some old movies. So what we tend to do on our podcast is based on what movies are being released or streamed, we try to find a retro movie that fits into that theme, and then we review it. And then we come up with our own headcanons, and if the movie were to be made today, recasts and remakes, and also just notice how movies change for us as we change over time.
Yeah, so you guys definitely, I think your sweet spot tends to be late 80s to mid 90s, maybe?
Oh, yes. Yes. Very rarely have we ventured past that. But 80s and 90s are just our bread and butter.
Yeah, I know. I'm a huge Batman fan, so big that I came on your show and I did Batman and Robin with you guys. So,
yes.
To be clear, that one's still to this day probably at the bottom of my ranks, but I still love Batman so much. I had a great time on that, so it's a fun show. You know, you guys do a great job over there, and you've been doing it for a long time. How many episodes are you up to now?
We are. I recently looked at it. We've done over 260 episodes.
Yes.
It's a lot of movies.
You guys are podcast vets, so if you're ever running out of content here at Retro Movie Roundtable with our gigantically long playtime, check out Flashback Flicks. They have a robust library to go through.
Yeah.
So, Ricky, what's the last movie you saw, by the way?
The last movie, it was Blankman. I watched Blankman for this podcast. I think before that, I actually went out and saw Wonder Woman 1984. Me and one other stranger in the movie theater were watching that movie.
Did you enjoy Wonder Woman 84?
I did, but it wasn't the same as the first one because there are differences.
Yes.
Of course. But I just felt like it was an unexpected sequel, but it still was good for the most part. But I was just like, this movie was really good, but so many times throughout the movie, I'm like, is this a Wonder Woman movie we're watching? Because I felt like this easily could, if you just deleted Wonder Woman from the whole movie, it would still be a really interesting, like M. Night Shyamalan esque kind of movie of just like, what if someone could grant every wish you ever wanted? Because it just felt like this was almost like a disaster movie.
I don't know, man. If you take Wonder Woman 84 and you take Wonder Woman out of it, then you're left with nothing but 1984, and that's a sad movie. That's a heavy movie.
I think that's what it was. I think that's exactly what it was.
Nathan, how about you? What was your last movie?
I happened to come across The Bourne Ultimatum.
Nice.
And thought that it might be fun to start a little bit of a rewatch of the Bourne movies. And that was a lot of fun. It's interesting to see over time that style of action where it's quick cuts and very gritty, real, but you are really being embedded in the feel of the franticness of that moment. It's really interesting to go back and see just how well some of that is actually done in that early version.
Interesting. Yeah. And the last movie that I just did, I got done watching Ad Astra.
Huh.
How was that?
Ambitious. Perhaps a little bit slower moving than I anticipated. I still liked it. I would caution people to be ready to go in for a slower paced movie, though. I didn't know that going in, and I think I'll appreciate it the second time around more, knowing that now.
That's a movie really trying to cash in on the 2001 feel. Really cool effects, great visuals.
I don't know that it's on 2001 level.
Oh, I'm not arguing that. I'm saying it's trying to cash in.
Yeah. All right, so today's movie is going to be Blankman from 1994. It grosses $7.9 million in the box office. It places at 125 on the box office, so that's not super high. It comes in behind The Puppet Masters and ahead of The Chase. And the number one movie that year for reference was The Lion King. And IMDb gives Blankman a 5.0. I feel like this is harsh, but not nearly as harsh as the critics of Rotten Tomatoes, who gave it a 19%. And the audience score, perhaps maybe bring a little bit of justice to it, gives it a 41%. No awards to show for this. So, Ricky, have you seen Blankman before? And tell people what your background with it is.
So I grew up not only watching Blankman, I love the Wayans family. I grew up watching a lot of the Wayans brothers TV show, but also there was an animated show called Wanehead on the Kids WB. I don't know if anyone remembers this. It didn't last very long. It was this show about Damon Wayans as a kid, and he wore a boot, like that boot that he used to like throw at people. That was like from his childhood. I want to say it was like an orthopedic thing.
Oh no.
And so like that was the whole thing about him just growing up as a kid. It was basically, for me, it was Hey Arnold before Hey Arnold.
Maybe a little bit of like Everybody Hates Chris kind of a vibe?
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. It was all animated. So yeah, I love the Wayans. And so I want to say around teen years is when I watched Blankman, and I remember liking it, but I don't remember liking it nearly as much as I did today because the movie was ahead of its time. I'm sure we'll talk more about that later, but I really like this movie, and pretty much anything that the Wayans had their hands on, I watched. I loved In Living Color and watching those reruns, and I loved Don't Be a Menace. And pretty much anything that the Wayans brothers, especially Sean and Marlon, had their hand in, I just loved. And so I had a very fond memory of rewatching this movie because I already owned the DVD and I watched it. I almost decided to watch it on full screen just to get the real nostalgic feel of it because it was a good time.
That's hardcore. Flashback flicks when you like cut off the I'm gonna sacrifice 25% of what I'm seeing here just because I really gotta experience it as I did in the 90s.
Yes.
Nathan, what about you? Had you seen Blankman before?
This was a movie that I not only had I not seen, but I had never heard of. And that's a real shame because I think this movie has aged incredibly well. This is something that I can feel at the time it might have come across as yet another cheesy superhero flick trying to capitalize on some of that popularity. The effects are kind of iffy and the plot's a little bit the same, but looking back on it, there are so many little details here that make almost every single scene really fascinating as, like, what are they really saying here and what do they really mean? And a lot of the humor is still good.
Yeah, I don't understand the low rankings on this one. I actually watched it once and I was just like, I had fun with that. But as always, I watched it a second time here for this one and I was like, wow, this is playing a lot better the second pass through. And the rewatch is high. And I hadn't seen it since I was young. I watched Major Payne, and I really enjoyed Major Payne a lot. So I remember picking up Blankman. It probably would have been a little bit after Major Payne, even though Major Payne came out afterwards. But I picked up Blankman a fair bit after the fact. I probably would have been in junior high. And I did enjoy it, but somehow, like what Ricky was saying, I think I enjoy this more today. I don't know if it's just because Marvel's hit me over the head with so much lately. And, seeing this parody / humorous side of it. I mean, this isn't like Deadpool funny. Like, this is like just parodying the genre itself. And I don't know that the genre was well enough established in 1994 to get people to know that. That or just marketing didn't serve this movie. Maybe Damon Wayans, his name just didn't, for whatever reason, hit the box office like you would hope that it would.
Yeah, my guess is that it was just an era, like you said, like the genre wasn't as established because the Wayans are no strangers to parody. They did I'm Gonna Get You Sucker back in the day, and then they are known for the Scary Movie, just starting that whole train of parodies. And, they're no strangers to parodying that genre, but I think that they just saw early on with the success of Burton's Batman. And I want to say Batman 2 had already been released just 2 years prior.
Yeah, I'm sure The Rocketeer was out.
Right. And so I'm sure that they were like, this is the thing that we need to parody. And they basically had the same Nolan vision. I just really think they were so far ahead of their time because they're like, what if someone just decided to become a superhero? In the same vein of like Kick-Ass.
Yes.
I was just like, this is pre-Kick-Ass and they're just doing it. I just was really impressed with that.
That's a great parallel, by the way.
Oh, that's all I could think about because his DIY costume, he just kind of came up with that. He accidentally came across the bulletproof serum for his suit and everything else. He was just getting beat up. I'm just like, oh, this is the exact same movie, but just way before anyone could even really appreciate it.
So, this is a part of the show where we want to let people know we are going to be spoiling Blankman, and it's very intricate, very well thoughtful plot, so we're going to make sure that if you are spoiler adverse, you're going to want to check the movie out and come back after this. We will be back after these messages.
Welcome to the Flashback Flicks Retro Movie Podcast. I'm Ricky.
I'm Grayson.
And every week we review a movie from the past and reflect on things we missed, things we loved, and things we want to see again.
Yeah, because we believe any movie worth watching is worth watching again.
So if you like films, friendship, and a lot of callbacks,
I mean, just so many callbacks,
then subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever RSS feeds go for like-minded movie-loving individuals. Like you.
All right, we're back, and this is your final warning. There will be spoilers for Blankman that lies ahead. So, Nathan, for those who haven't seen Blankman since 1994, do you want to give people a recap?
I do, Russell. Let's get going. Two Chicagoan boys grow up on a diet of Adam West Batman, raised by their grandmother. Aside from sharing the last name Walker, they could not have grown up to be more different. Kevin is a down-to-earth, career-oriented, karate class-taking man with journalistic ambitions, while Daryl is an inventive genius living in a situation where his talents go underappreciated and his mental health needs go undiagnosed. But when their grandmother is killed by mobsters when helping the earnest mayoral candidate Marvin Harris, Daryl copes by combining his comic book inspirations and gadget-making skills to become Brother Man, at least until his brother Kevin and the police laugh at that name away. Unnamed, but still undeterred, Daryl continues to serve his community, dressed in homemade superhero garb, mostly solving everyday problems. Kevin tags bemusedly along, initially frustrated at needing to protect his willful but unsavvy brother, but eventually taking inspiration from their success. Eventually, one of their rescues draws a crowd, and Kevin, covering for his dumbstruck brother in the face of so much attention, tells a woman that he's blank, ma'am. Misheard, the name sticks when Kimberly Johns, the anchor at Kevin's news company, reports the birth of a hero, Blankman. Though seemingly small in scope, Daryl's efforts inspire Marvin Harris, now mayor, to renew his stand against the mobsters. The mob boss, Michael Minnelli, engineers a complex heist in revenge. Dressed as Blankman, Daryl foils the robbery, but his and Kevin's efforts fail to save the mayor's life. Unsatisfied, Minnelli sets his sights on Blankman. After Kimberly Johns interviews Daryl as Blankman at his secret subway stop hideout, her and Kevin's slimy boss, Mr. Stone, surmises that she might serve as a damsel in distress and leaks the information to Minnelli. The mob boss lays a trap, which Daryl and Kevin both fall into. At the last moment, one of Daryl's inventions, a robot he calls J5, arrives to save Johns and the brothers, but in the process, the almost sentient machine has to be sacrificed. Newly determined, Kevin joins Daryl on his quest to take Minnelli down, finally wearing the superhero suit his brother made and contributing his karate skills. Working together, they succeed in getting the mobster arrested, but figure he'll only be in for about 20 years or so.
Yes, and well done, well done. Now, Ricky, I want to pick back up where you left off again. I really like how you mentioned that you saw some parallels to Kick-Ass, which Kick-Ass did pretty well. It was well received. Mm-hmm. It spawned a sequel, and I want to go back to that. This being ahead of its time, what is it that this movie is doing that maybe even laid the groundwork for Kick-Ass?
I would say that, so Kick-Ass was based off of a comic, and, a lot of people loved the comic, and it was immediately optioned. I think the thing that this movie did, though, is that it kind of bridged that gap tonally, I think is a major difference, because it was just a funnier approach. Like Blankman's first night out on the prowl, his first encounter is like, well, slap me around and call me Susan. And then he just gets beat up. He just gets slapped around. And Damon Wayans, so many of the Wayans are just so physically comedic. And I audibly laugh like that whole scene. He's just getting beat up. And that's where I was just like, this is kick-ass. Because like when he first goes out, he just gets the cookies beat out of him. But I think that they just took a more comedic approach, and they almost had a slightly Burton-esque kind of world that they were building as well, because it was grounded in our reality to a degree, but as the movie went on, it just became an Adam West era Batman episode, straight down to the, I'm going to fill this laundry tub with water, and once this timer goes out, everything's going to blow up, and the banter and everything. And so I think just tone is the other thing, but I think it laid the groundwork because they just established that, like, there is this world that exists, not unlike our own, because I'm just like, wow, so few things have changed since 1994. It's just acknowledging that, like, something else should be done. And I even noticed that they had a ton of themes that they talked about in The Dark Knight. You know, there's a mayor, one man can make a difference, and you know, everyone's putting all their hopes in this political figure who ultimately falls from grace publicly. And I just think that it just hit on so many themes that I think you pointed out. It's just like the genre wasn't ready to be parodied quite yet. I just think people were expecting one thing or another and not this movie that held a lot of complex themes and tones that I think now everyone would just absolutely go for.
I agree completely, and I think that those themes are this movie's secret sauce for a modern audience, because when you look at, especially right now in this past year, you have this idea of a city in which the police force is really challenged, underfunded, and maybe a little bit misdirected. There's some hints in this movie that maybe some of the top brass of the police are maybe pulling some strings in a way which really are not helping people, but the people down at the ground level are trying to do their best, but they have this problem where the city can't pay them. And at the same time, you've got these other really interesting ideas, and I'm going to pop this up as to a very different way I think this movie can be interpreted. I think that Daryl is someone who his situation is not addressing some needs that he has to have some mental health problems that he's dealing with addressed in a way which lets him get to his full potential, because this is a brilliant guy who is socially awkward, who's living in a situation where that specific thing holds him back in a way which some other people in the city wouldn't be held back. And I think that's a really, really interesting lens to watch this movie through.
That's interesting. They did have a scene, though, where he did get some psychiatric help, and he did an ink blot test, which was incredibly descriptive with all kinds of information.
I love that.
And then he got to the boobs, and he's like, I don't see it.
That's psychiatrist.
The therapist holds it up in front of his chest. He's like, really, you don't see anything? And then he goes, really, there's nothing wrong with him. He's just a nerd.
Yep.
The word nerd has got overused.
But it goes one step further, because Kevin gets mad at him, and his brother's like, he's like, what? Aren't you going to tell him? Like, he's like, I don't go around fighting crimes, silly.
What are you talking about?
He's like, there's a lot of anger here right now. Is it always this hostile at home?
That was the one scene that kind of undermined that little thesis of mine on that in the movie. After that, it kind of goes back to normal. It was like, how could you do this to me? You made me look ridiculous.
Yep. Well, and I just speaking to that, I think the casting, you know, you have two In Living Color alumni, Damon Wayans and David Alan Grier, both playing really strong but also really comedic roles. I really loved this pairing because they know how to work off of each other really well. David Alan Grier, I remember thinking he was more of the straight man when I would watch it younger, but I was just like, they're both equally really comedic. And I really, the person who I think acts as the straight man is Robin Gibbons, who played Kimberly Jones. She is really just grounding because both characters are just really out there in their own right. But I just really love, like, David Alan Grier. Every scene he was in, he just committed. And that's the other thing that I really appreciated is these comedic actors who know how to commit fully to that character. It was just so funny. Like, I laughed out loud more times than I was expecting, because especially with a lot of these early 90s comedies, I'm anticipating some cringe or some things that just aren't going to go as well. But I was so pleasantly surprised by all of these performances because they were just so fun and comedic physically, because I know that nowadays most comedy is linked to improv or just more in like the talking and the dialogue or the exchange, but they were just willing to just physically go there. And I just really loved both of their performances with that.
No, it's a very good point. And we keep talking about how this is playing better today, whether it be, I think the fact that it's told, the cast is in all, mostly, and minus Jason Alexander, but and the mayor, but I mean, mostly African-American cast. And I think that perspective in a mainstream comedy type movie, Ricky, you've dived in more into this era than I have. Doesn't seem to me like that was as well of an established thing as it is today, where people are going to say like, that's a movie for me, and like I'm gonna go check that out, and it's gonna have a different voice, and I want that different perspective. And so I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's dived specifically into this era, is it ahead of its time in that way too?
Well, I'll just share my experience. The thing to do, especially with a lot of movies that get a wide release with a predominantly black cast, is that you know that you support the black movies, especially because you want them to do well, because you understand the economy of the show business. And I think the Wayans weren't as popular as like the Murphys, like Eddie Murphy, Chris Tucker, like everyone knows about them in their movies and if they're going to be in the lead. And the Wayans, though a household name, they weren't ever as popular as some of these singular star focused black comedic talents, or even like Martin Lawrence or Will Smith, all these other actors who kind of went more into either action specific or action comedy. Very few stayed within the realm of comedy that was received as well as some of these other predominantly black-led films. But I think that this movie with Living Color still, I want to say that it was still on the air at the time. And that show was doing very well for a while. Until it wasn't. But it was still, they were still a household name. So I think they were really following the same path that SNL was doing at the time, which was, you had these TV actors who were ready to break out into film.
Yes.
And so when they got that vehicle, because this was also written by Damon Wayans, and so they got him a vehicle to show off his acting chops and to show that he was ready to break into that Hollywood scene in that way. But, the Wayans, just as a team, I think that they are always willing to work with each other to bring about each other's dreams. Like, even today, Marlon Wayans has like 3 movies on Netflix, it seems like, going at any point in time. And it's because the Wayans brand of comedy is just so infectious that like you know what you can expect from them, but you also never know what you're going to get from them. And I think that they've kind of carved out their own space in the industry.
No, that's kind of what I was sitting there thinking. I it's ahead of its time in that way too. And just getting into this is a funny movie on its own, though, not into how it was received. Nathan, what are some of the parts of this that just made you laugh? You mentioned that this movie, each scene made you happy. Like, what are some of these things that it's doing? Like, what are the mechanisms?
One of the things that I love most about this movie is the degree of care and love that's gone into everything, from the costuming to the gadgets to the way that the script has people interact with everything in a way that just makes me feel like everybody trusted everybody else when making this movie, because there are so many physical gags with these amazing props where the prop is, I mean, it's not something that you're going to package and sell as a McDonald's Happy Meal exactly, but it's something that you believe he could have made in this world. And so there's all these wonderful world building gags to do with how thrown together everything is. And also a lot of the comedy is this situational result of how those things came to be and how ridiculous they are, and it's wonderful. You're never brought out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The gadgets just really made me happy. I mean, perhaps I'm a huge Bond fan, and I love Adam West Batman as well. And so, to me, tapping into all of that stuff and bringing it into a real world and actually seeing a plunger gun, like in a real life comedy that can't, like, there's no way that's going to support a full grown man, but it does, and it works beautifully. And I mean, there's something Looney Tunes about that. Like, this is like Bugs Bunny hopping off of the cartoons and then like working well. Like the rollerblades that like have like wheels in them, like they can't possibly fit into a pair of feet like that. But then like they that's literally Wile E. Coyote's stuff. And
or the times when things work as badly as they should, like in the elevator rescue scene where he's turning his hands around the cable, trying to wind his way down. I'm coming. I'll be there, almost there. Yep. And it's like, yeah. You built this thing. It is janky, but it's amazing.
Like, this movie, I feel like needed more than any other movie in its genre the disclaimer, do not attempt this at home, because I really wanted to. Because I was just like, you know what? That plunger, like, I'm just like, that suction looks like that. You can hold something on that. You can hold, because they just did such a good job of making you believe, like, oh, he built this. Like, this is all doable.
You know what? I am going to attach fireworks to the sides of my roller skates.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, give it a go.
The shoe grappling hook, that's another great one. Like, just tying a boot at the end of a rope.
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And something that, Nathan, you brought up, the quality of care. The moment in the script where they have Blankman Day and they're going to reopen the banks and give all these police officers their checks, and the police officer's just like, Blankman, what do we do? That moment, like, I was just so, like, I felt tension. I was like, wait, what? Well, he doesn't know what to do. Like, and it was one of those moments where I'm just like, wait, do we really need to be trusting heroes with all of our problems? Like, that moment was just so carefully crafted to the point where I was convinced that this was all an inside job. I'm like, wait a second.
And it was.
I thought it was like the mayor and the police are together. The mayor, he's still alive. He's still alive, and he's going to be the real villain. I thought that was going to happen. It didn't. But like, that's the degree. I thought that this is going to be so that the police are in Manelli's pocket, and the mayor is he's actually the real mastermind behind all of this. Like, that's how pivotal that moment was to me. I'm just like, wait a second, this is going to be and it wasn't. But even just having that kind of questioning of like, okay, if we are going to actually put this responsibility on these superheroes, like, to what degree are we expecting any one person to solve all of our problems? And I just thought that was really strongly done. And in a lesser movie, they wouldn't have even bothered with a moment like that.
Yeah.
True. And they actually blew the mayor up, too.
Yeah. And he was like dead. Like, really.
I will say there was a visual language during that scene that I was 100% sure that they were going to remember that hole was there in the floor and drop all the bombs down that hole. And they just ran past it. And I was like, guys?
That's just me.
I think you could have saved the mayor. Maybe?
Yep.
But
that did occur to me, too, because I was like, that's a pretty big hole. I don't know how far that down there goes.
Like a bomb-sized hole, almost. Yeah. Like, it could fit perfectly that bag of bombs.
Yeah. Despite that one little plot loop that you found there, like, one of my favorite pieces of care was J5, the super ghetto robot, looking hilarious. But it's the washing machine from the opening scene when they're kids. Like when in that opening scene, like when the grandmother's doing laundry, that is J5.
Yeah,
and I didn't notice that until the second time around.
J5 has my favorite moment, maybe in any movie ever. Where J5's like, my calculations are correct. J5 should be on his way. And it's just J5. And he just
clunk, bang.
I was like, listen, whoever had the costume design to put that little
pom-pom
hair was brilliant because J5 moving around with that hair was the greatest physical gag. I was like actually crying, laughing. I had to pause the movie just to recover from that whole scene. Oh my goodness.
The glass door too was awesome because he comes and Kevin's all happy. He's like, "Yes, we're actually going to be saved by your like crappy robot." And then like he breaks through the glass door, and falls on his face, and you don't think he can get up.
It was so good.
One of the things that happens a little bit earlier than that in the movie that made the scene doubly amazing for me is the scene where Daryl is closing down the blank cave subway and he's turning everything off, and I think it is J5 that like makes a sad sound at him, and he goes, "Oh, don't make this worse than it is." And at that moment I was like, oh my gosh, these robots are sentient, they are conscious, yes. And he is killing them. He's being forced to kill them. And then later in the movie, it's like, J5, the real hero of this movie, he left this world too soon.
I have a sneaky suspicion he might pop up for Best Supporting for somebody then. This is.
Yes. I mean, lead maybe even, because J5, you noticing that J5 was the same washing machine from the beginning. Now I have to rewatch it and watch J5's journey. It's going to be like R2-D2 and C-3PO.
There are a number of those things that upon rewatches, there are small things like that do sit there and go like, that's actually a fair bit of consideration for a movie like this that, you know, again, I'm watching it twice back to back or close back to back that, you know, I'm taking a discerning eye, but I don't ask for a goofy comedy to do some of these things, and I'm going to give it some credit for doing that. So,
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are tons of setups and payoffs that I just really loved. Like even the episode of Batman that they chose to show in the flashback at the very beginning, I'm like, they're like recreating this exact episode. And the thing that ended up being Manelli's lair at the end, I'm just like, well, this is just all wish fulfillment right now. And at that moment, I just imagined Damon Wayans said, I want to make a Batman movie. And the studio said, well, someone else owns that property. And he pulled a Sam Raimi and said, I'm going to make my own Batman movie. And he made Blankman. And Raimi made Darkman.
Gosh, I also love Kevin is such a good straight man to Daryl. And just, it's like the not taking the radio and like having his mother and like going behind a closed door yelling at him, you take that radio.
Yep.
And he doesn't want to, and sure enough, it makes him look stupid later. Like he's he's in the lunchroom at his work talking to his belt, which looks all kinds of hilarious. And he's like, "Not now, I'm busy. Look, this is as close as I can talk. Yep. I'd like to play, but I got work to do."
Yep. And one of my favorite moments too was when he finally suited up in their end of the lair. He's like, "Shoot me! He's like, "Oh, your suit's not bulletproof." And he just actually gets shot, and I'm just like, I love this. I absolutely love this. Of course, this would happen to him.
Now we haven't talked yet about this cartoon villain. Like I keep mentioning how cartoonish this movie is in real life, but Joe Polito Michael, the suit Manelli.
Yes.
He's so physically, he's amazing, like as like this cartoonish villain, but also he plays it so well.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna put this out there. This movie is Batman and Robin crossed with Rain Man, and a lot of the actors are playing one or the other of those movies. Daryl is in the Batman and Robin movie. Kevin is in the Rain Man movie. Manelli is in the Batman movie. The mayor is in the Rain Man movie. It's kind of amazing to see how they're all like, this role is truly this thing.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, John Polito is just someone who delivers 100%, just like leaving nothing but everything on the stage. And I just loved it. Even just his little lines like, so you're not joking. You're not pulling my chain. You asking for trouble? It's like, yeah, well, you'll get it. I'm just like, oh no. Oh no.
And they kill him. That's amazing. amazing.
Yeah.
He is pretty brutal. Like, you know, I mean, he like shoots up a whole election office. I mean, so he's a legitimate bad guy, but somehow he's still funny. Like when he dumps coffee on the guy in the wheelchair's lap and he's like,
I love this guy.
Okay, I was half expecting Mr. Stone to later in the movie turn out to not be paraplegic and like stand up and be like, that actually really did hurt.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And Jason Alexander, like when I saw his name in the credits, I'm like, I don't remember Jason Alexander being in this movie, and then he showed up, and I was like, wow. It's just like, and I also was like, this is also early enough in Jason Alexander's career where he has to wear a bald cap him saving costume and wardrobe sometime. But I mean, he did a really great job. And I really believed his whole character. That's also something I think just might be an era thing, but I forgot so much about like tabloid newspapers that it's just like, okay, just go to the wall. And he just starts throwing darts at all these different things. Asking
Vice
about
President, alien, S&M sex.
Yeah, right.
And then 2 scenes later, it's like, and this guy won't talk to us anymore. Yeah, you ran that made-up story about him.
Yep. Oh.
It's tabloid television. We can do whatever we want. We can find out anything. I do like the continuing, like, how did you find me? Like how did you find my base? It wasn't that hard.
Yep.
Complete, like, no exposition, just poking fun in the genre. Love it.
Yeah.
One thing that I didn't think, you did mention how well this movie's aging. The only thing that I didn't think, or the big thing that caught me, was like there was a TV like show, kind of like Maury or like Ricky
Yes.
Lake or something like that, and they had quote unquote midget man and gay man.
Oh,
and
gosh.
and I was sitting there going like, wow, most of this is going to play really well today. This is the only thing that I like made me sit there and go like, this is, you don't make this in 2021.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I was trying to make it make sense. I'm just like, I mean,
They're heroes. They're good guys.
But at the time when Tony Cox was saying, I'm midget man, I'm like, okay, I can go with it. It's the 90s, terms evolve, sure. And then gay man showed up. I was like, well, I don't think that one's gonna
That one's too hard to
gonna
work.
fly the same. But that kind of goes back to the whole Kick-Ass thesis, is that like once one person started, because what I also thought was going to happen is that at the end, all of the other people from that panel were going to show up and say, we're here, Blankman. We're going to take him down. And he basically forms his own little Blankman Justice League. And that is what I wanted more than anything. It's just for that whole world to just be built from the ground up.
You might have been able to get that had this profited enough and then been greenlit for a sequel.
Right.
It would have been the return of Other Man.
Still, yeah, like he might have gotten an even worse name, like
Other guy, man.
and he gets the t-shirt.
maybe they would incorrectly assume that he's like Robin, like he's younger or something like that.
Yep.
Like was a Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Kid?
Yep.
He's my younger brother. I'm
Yeah.
older than him.
Yep.
There is a scene I wish we had where the new mayor is like, wait, we got to give awards to 2 people? Oh no, what else can we get? We have this t-shirt.
Which I just found out very recently, just because I was curious. They have an actual Blankman t-shirt that you can buy on Etsy. I mean, you could also probably just make your own. But, people made merch from this movie. Like, it resonates with at least this person who's selling the t-shirt on Etsy. Because I think this movie probably has like a larger cult following than a lot of people would expect. Because I know when Black Panther came out, for example, a lot of people were like, this is like one of the first mainstream Black-led superhero movies. And people were saying, oh, no, Catwoman was also there. And I'm just like, we don't count Catwoman, everyone. But then I was just like, but is everyone really forgetting about Blankman? Because I remember Blankman. I feel like Blankman should be brought to the table, at least to this conversation.
You shortlisted Meteor Man as well, and both of those popped into my head. And then to which everyone says, first serious, like a Marvel universe. I was like, well, there is Blade. Wesley Snipes did 3 movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh yeah, but I mean, this is the first. I'm sitting there going like,
Yeah.
all right.
Depending on what you want to categorize as, for sure. But I mean,
how many adjectives are you going to throw on this?
But seriously, like Blankman, I do remember thinking it wasn't as serious as it was, but like seriously, like rewatching it today, I'm like, no, like this movie, like though it is in the comedy genre, they still have serious tones in it, and the stakes are real. Their grandmother died. People were murdered. A public official was assassinated. Like these are real things. And just because Damon Wayans is playing like a very heightened character, a portrayal of a nerdy character, right down to like the fork glasses, I loved it. I'm like, yes, give me all of this. You know, they still wrote a solid movie with characters who have desires, who are still people, and it's not just joke after joke like I think a lot of the later parody scary movies became, where it's just like references, jokes. Like this is like, no, these are characters with bits and characters with these moments, but that would make sense within this world that they created. And I just really, really loved it.
No, that's a very good point. I will say later on, Tron and Marlon's efforts sometimes get a little bit lazier. And I guess you can cash checks at an alarming rate. I don't know how many scary movies they got up to, but I mean, when you only put like a year in between them and stuff like that, and you do just want to keep going back to the well, and you want to keep, like, if someone says, get this out now, it's going to make lots of money. But you're right. This movie didn't make money, and it's a bit of a shame because it's better crafted, you know?
Absolutely.
You know, yeah. I like the love triangle that they make where, like, the both brothers like Kimberly, and consistently, time and time again, she likes the guy who's out there, nerdy, completely weird, dressed in bed sheets and like around his neck, and she just keeps falling for him over and over again, head over heels. And
my favorite moment was like at the end when she's just like, I knew it was you. And they just start making out. I'm just like, I love this movie. Like it is doing everything right. And I want to say, actually, I forget who says this, but like we quoted a lot on Flashback Flicks, but it's always a stronger choice to parody the things that you love. You can tell the Wayans like really love Batman and that whole world, even though it was, it fell from favor after a while, but that they love the campiness. They love, like, they really wanted to be Batman. Like, I'm sure so many kids of that era wanted to be, and, you know, every kid who ever sees Batman, like, yep, that's my future job occupation. But I can tell that this was like a real love letter to growing up with those types of movies, and also just superheroes as a whole.
Now, Damon Wayans is the creative force and the primary performer, and this is his vehicle on this one. But Nathan, director Mike Bender, what do you think that he brings to this to also kind of, we talked about the amount of craft and care in this one. I don't want to go without talking about, like, this is pretty well directed for this movie, and for a movie of this type. Do you want to give Mike Bender any props here?
Yeah, I want to give him some props for these big crowd scenes where, close to the beginning, when Mayor Harris is running and the mobsters slowly make their way in, there's a real sense of threat that I felt was actually a pretty modern feeling scene. It's all at head height. They're emerging from the crowd. They're coming through. They're starting to make their move, and nothing comes across as overly cartoony in the directing itself. It's really cool.
I can't believe how many times I kept saying, like, my big change, or the thing that I would do differently, or my critiques of this, is I would just do more of what you're doing. Like during that montage, like when he was doing successful crimes, I want to see more like hilariously, successfully executed crimes. Like when you start saying like, oh, I want more of that.
Yeah.
You know, that's when you know you really got something. And so I think Damon Wayans and Mike Bender, again, I wish there was more information online about this. There's really not. I suspect that there was a good working relationship there. This is me only speculating, but because it seems to be executed pretty well for the vision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that vision was really executed well, because like it wasn't as Tim Burton Art Deco-y in the city. Like it was like, this is
raw Chicago,
right? Like this is Chicago, right? Like, and it's meant to feel like that, but also all the things that happened around it that were kind of being injected into, which I think just happens with any kind of superhero. Any presence of the superhero kind of ups the ante of like the whole world around it. And so naturally all of the villains are going to get more cartoony by comparison. But I do think that it just was so grounded. And I think that vision was executed so well with the director and all the acting from the entire cast. When I first watched it and Damon Wayans was doing his character, I was just like, man, I wish he wasn't as cartoony. like just that was just my first impression. But then I'm like, I believe him to be real. Like 20 minutes in, I'm like, no, he just exists. He's a real human. He really exists in this world. And I think that's just a testament to not only, you know, Damon having himself be the character who he wants to portray as the main hero, but also in knowing the direction of the world, because the world that the hero exists in informs the hero. And so there's a reason why Batman occupies Gotham and not Metropolis. Like it's a very different need there, and also a different background to the story. And I just love that Blankman wasn't just motivated to save the city because you're like, oh, I'll be popular, or I'll finally be cool. Like his whole moral compass was just to do good, and do good by his grandmother. And I was just like, that's just so compelling. I'm just so on board with this. I love it. And you don't get those emotional highs and lows without like a really strong director. So definitely.
One more Mike Bender thing that we talked about this being Chicago, but they actually put a couple of these semi-ambitious like overhead shots that like showed the stakes of what's in play. It's the corruption of the government, like it's the city in play, and like they have these long shots of Chicago, which is kind of funny. Like they're trying to make it look gray and like dismal in the foreground, but still there's the beautiful Chicago skylines in the distance at the same time. But also these overhead shots of like these city intersections and stuff like that. They do it about 5-6 times in the movie, and they're helicopter shots and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there going like, that is Nolan-esque. Nolan likes to shoot down from high buildings and from helicopters and show like, again, he has said like, this is what's in play. Yep. This is the board game that's in front of us, and these are the stakes, and it's big. It's the whole city, and it's bigger than just one person. And I did sit there and going like, wow, again, I don't ask for this out of a comedy movie, but those little transitions and stuff like that. Way to use the location. Great location too. Love Chicago.
Yeah. And it's not just those overall establishing shots that are like that either. It's also that very long, really awesome scene where Daryl and Kimberly are riding the amazing subway sidecar vehicle.
Yeah.
And they're not just shooting on the vehicle and stationary on side. They're following along. They're helicoptering along. I mean, I would take that over the Lois and Superman flying scene any day.
Yes.
Just such a hilarious, great scene. Well shot. The craft that went into all the equipment, just hilarious.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what? Sometimes it was ghetto on purpose, paying homage to Adam West Batman. Like the news station room. My first thought the first time through was just like, I'm very aware I'm looking at like a very cardboardy set of a newsroom.
Yep.
But then the second time through is just like, oh, this is meta. Like this is totally what they want it to be. Like the color spectrum is actually a little bit like retro. This looks like the flatness of like an Adam West Batman, like news station or something like that. I didn't pick up on that the first time. And clearly nor did the critics, because only 19% of them liked it.
Yeah.
You know, I think what I'm realizing is, because I did watch the Roger Ebert and Siskel interview on what they thought of this movie. And Siskel liked it better than Ebert. But what he said essentially was he thought the first half or the first 2/3 were hilarious and really great, and then it petered out by the end. When what I think they weren't realizing was something that, Ricky, you said earlier, that this is a movie that they are slowly transforming it into a literal episode of Adam West Batman. And so it starts off in a way that's serious and toned and has all these themes to the environment of what's going on around them in the realistic Chicago city. And by the end of it, it slowly morphs into an episode. And that actually goes to address what my main criticism of the movie was, in the feeling I had that the mobster plot was a little bit too separate from where Daryl had come from and Kevin had come from. I felt that it was a little bit of a stretch to connect those two, but knowing that that's what they were going for, it is kind of cool in retrospect to think about it that way.
Yeah. No, I think honestly, my only complaint from the movie, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how it does exist. I only have notes of how I would modernize it, because I think the script on its own, you change a couple of references, like, maybe re-workshop Gay Man and some other references like that, but like
put Hipster Man in there.
Yeah, Hipster Man. Maybe figure out how you have that bomb-shaped hole in the bank. Maybe patch that up a little bit. But other than that, I would just modernize it by grounding Kevin a little bit more into, because I want to see more of his world and more of how he sees the world, just a little bit different. Because again, we're looking at a different era of what being a nerd was. So like we're looking at like Urkel versus Sheldon Cooper, right? And it's just like it's a difference of timeline and reference. Both are the same, but I think just as the, you know, the world and public opinion change and what it means to be a nerd or a geek shifts, it would be interesting to see what that iteration would look like.
Now, would you change or modernize the amazing wardrobe in this movie? Would you keep the red long johns and the floral bed sheets?
None of that changes. That has to be set in stone.
Maybe his mask is a ShamWow so that it soaks up a lot of water and you use that at one point. That's the only thing that I'm thinking at some point, and just be like,
I will allow it.
Yeah, that is the only thing for sure. And yes, even other guy's suit was amazing. It was a Michigan sweatshirt with a hat and football pants that were pink.
Little fedora. I loved
the
it.
rattiness.
I gotta say, the other guy's suit was cool. The smaller, more fitted eyepiece, the mask, the hat.
Loved it.
Great.
Now, Ricky, how fun is this soundtrack? Because I didn't expect that. Because I guess enough time's gone by where it's just like, this is a throwback for me of just like, this is a whole lot of fun.
Man, the art of the movie soundtrack, that's one of the things I miss the most about movies and music. Because like I used to buy, because I grew up in Houston, every Tuesday, it was music release day, I would go over, I said go over, my mom would take me to Sound Waves and I would always get the latest release. But if it was a movie that had a movie soundtrack, I bought it because they had such hits. And that movie soundtrack, just like, even just from the opening, the little Blankman number, like, Blankman! I was like, I am transported back to 1994. There is a squeeze it within arm's reach of me, and Dunkaroos are in the pantry. And
I was going to say gushers.
I have just sense memory to just that kind of sound and that music. It was just so good. Like, and those soundtracks just did something a little bit different.
Now, Nathan, you're a little bit younger than Ricky and I, so like
I would have been about 1 year old at that time.
I was gonna say, so you missed this early phase of hip hop, which I might add is more fun. Like hip hop was just a lot more fun at this point.
Man,
it wasn't so serious at that, which as it would soon become after this. What was your take on hearing some of that like thrown into this goofy superhero movie?
I thought it was a great balance that they struck between the hip hop side and then also slowly transitioning into the like operatic comic book movie fight scene type music and all those things where it's all the brass hits and the foreboding strings.
Oh, you're right. They drop the R&B stuff out, don't they?
They drop it slowly, and some of those scenes gradually start being more strings oriented and more orchestral. It's cool. It is really cool.
I didn't notice that right away.
Really cool.
Huh. I didn't pick up on that. So you're right. The hip hop and the R&B stuff from the beginning starts to drop out as he becomes a superhero more full fledged. That's interesting. That's well crafted.
Oh, just so good. Like I just like that takes thought. That just takes a great team and just such quality of care. I just love it. Like the more we talk about this movie, I'm just like, does this movie exist on Blu-ray? Like, can I get? Because the DVD exists as a lot of early DVDs do, where the special features are languages or trailers for other movies.
Yeah, there's not much extra to bite into on this one, and that was a bummer.
Yeah, but I just really enjoy so much of this movie, and the music was just so great. Because like there's also this trope, and I'm only now just kind of becoming aware of it, but anytime there was like a characters are falling in love scene, like just one of the best R&B songs, you would be like, oh yeah, obviously this is the song you fall in love to, plays, and it's different every time, but in every single movie you hear it and you're like, yep, of course. Like I don't know why. I guess the reason why I haven't been falling in love is because my moments have not been soundtracked by amazing R&B music.
That's right. You need to queue up your Spotify a little bit differently now.
You need to have a speaker on your belt that you can just tap on when you know that moment's coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think now is the time.
Now, do you guys want to hand out some awards?
I do, Russell.
I would love it.
Ricky, give us the honor. Who is your MVP of Blankman?
It's tough, but, and I mean this in all sincerity, this isn't like a dig at anyone. J5 is the absolute MVP of this entire movie.
He jumped the supporting into the MVP for you.
I am right there with you. That's
MVP J5. That moment just destroyed me. Like I needed time to recover.
Is J5 in your top 10 movie droids?
yes.
Maybe. I don't know who's at the top, but he's in the top 5 for sure. Oh man.
I love it.
That moment when Kimberly is looking at Daryl crying over the broken remains of J5 and she's like, this man has a heart.
I love how it gets to the point where he can't do anything wrong. Like when he's just like, okay, I'm going to leave you now. And she's just like, I love how you maintain a sense of humor in these elevated, stressful situations. It's just like laying it on real thick. And I love it.
Such a great moment. Yep.
So J5 for both of you guys then. All right. I got to go Damon Wayans on this one just because,
Yes.
as the writer, the star, and if nothing else, he screams like a woman. So, and like, somebody help that lady.
Oh gosh. Yeah, shoot him in the face. Just that whole scene is just so good. Yeah. Oh man. And Damon Wayans, I mean, and seriously, J5, Damon Wayans did such a great job writing for J5 that, I'll give him a consideration in that category. But seriously, like J5, like to know that you want that character in the movie, just like don't, like if anyone's like, do we need this robot? It's like, yes, we do. Don't question me. This robot needs to be in the movie and it's gonna be great.
Oh yeah.
A lot. Like
a lot.
throughout. Oh.
Think about it. When he's looking for the blank cave, it's not going to be that funny unless J5's there talking back and forth. Yeah, you're right, J5. It does smell like Peet.
Like little hair just shagging about, just carrying all the stuff. Yeah.
And J5 has a sense of humor too. There was some humor in this movie that was a little bit on the crude end, but I was coming to the realization of how sentient J5 was during the scene where he rescues them. And that J5 deliberately cut the holes in the aquarium tank exactly where he did because he knew that would be funny.
J5 was like, oh, this is a good bit. Yep.
I'm going to make it look like you two are pissing.
Any bomb sniffs the bomb into the ladies' bathroom? The one place that he knew we couldn't go. So, all right. So, best supporting, Ricky.
As much as I like to give it to David Allen Greer, I would have to say Robin Gibbons, just as Kimberly John's amazing supporting. I really think that she carried a lot of the grounding. And I was believing her throughout the entire relationship. She's like, he's just unlike any other guy I've ever met. He's just so caring.
And that's after being so skeptical to Kevin in the news station too. So like this is just, you're right. She's so genuine and she is quite a catch too, to the point where it's just like, what's happening in this reality? Like, what? Why is this very pretty woman falling head over heels?
Well, she doesn't know anything about Daryl.
It is a bit of a Revenge of the Nerds moment, though, and so
Oh yeah.
So Nathan, who's your best supporting?
Following up on Kimberly, I do think that Kevin Walker, played by David Allen Greer, is the other half of that stabilizing bedrock of this movie, where Daryl is giving him such a hard time. He's having to support this guy who's just a genius, but his talents just don't work in the world that they live in. And gradually over the course of the movie, he comes to realize just how valuable Daryl's mind is and everything. And he sells that transition and that seriousness in a way that I just loved through the movie.
Oh, he injects a lot of humor. I wish he had gotten more roles. Just I feel like he's a versatile guy who can do humor, but also be a supporting guy who makes things better. I often wonder why we don't see a little more of him.
Yeah, David Allen Greer, I mean, he has one of those interesting careers because he's been around for a while. Like I know he's had a couple of sitcoms. I think his most recent sitcom was like on NBC. And it was like he was like an older family man kind of sitcom, but he's been around and he's just a treasure. I know he was in Boomerang with Eddie Murphy, and also, you know, I'm blanking. Robin Gibbons was also in Boomerang. That's what I actually know her from. I'm just like, Robin Gibbons is in this movie, and so his career, I think, is just so classic. And but he's another one of those. I feel like him and so many of the Wayans are like, as far as career goes, or career-wise from In Living Color goes, I'd say he's more of a Martin Short than like a Steve Martin as far as like career trajectory post SNL. Really strong, really good at their craft, but like they don't necessarily have as pervasive of a career because of their strengths in going to that extreme. Like not many people have, like, or I should say kind of like Jim Carrey. Like even though Jim Carrey did come from Living Color, that he's like, you get Jim Carrey for what Jim Carrey brings, which is physical and rubber face. But it's like but you're not going to have him be as everywhere nowadays as much as he was back in the time when that was what people wanted.
I think there's something about being a type of actor, and don't get me wrong, the powerhouses like a Jim Carrey are amazing people, but like there's something that's really nice to see. Some comedians can do that. Some comedians can enhance and make everybody around them better. And I'm thinking of somebody like a Phil Hartman or somebody like that, of like, you know, he doesn't take over, but boy, he sure makes everything around him better. And I think that's true of this guy too. So, all right. My best supporting is going to be Lynne Thigpen. Grandma Walker was awesome. We lost her too soon. She was amazing. She was sassy, but also I love it when she yells at him, "You're going to take that belt." And I knew she was familiar. You know, she was on Carmen Sandiego, the geography-based trivia show, as she was the chief. And I didn't. Yes. And so I loved Carmen Sandiego. I'm a geography nerd, or at least I was at that age and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I think this game show has been killed by simply having Google for kids to be able to like look up countries and stuff like that. But it used to be a game show where like they would ask you what is this country's shape, or you know, and they would read some fact, and you'd have to be like, that is Morocco. So anyway, Lynne Thigpen. Now, hidden gem, Ricky.
Ooh, I'd say I'm gonna go with the mayor.
Nice.
I think the mayor was really compelling as his role. Like that's a good grounding character and great dynamic to establish. Like everyone trying to put hope into this one person. Like that, there's this whole campaign. Like one person can make a difference, and maybe it's just because we're like coming off of an election year. I'm just like, this just feels like so timely. But like, I think that the mayor's role in the story and his character was very believable. Like he wasn't like this overly sleazy or cheesy politician. Like he just felt real, and so I really enjoyed that.
So Christopher Lawford.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
And neither was he overly earnest. He's naive at the beginning, and there's that one scene that I think is so important to this movie where Blankman is going around doing good deeds, but they're small scale, they're minor, but he sees them on TV in a moment when he seems to be about to capitulate to the mob, and he does this great bit of face acting where you just see him decide, you know what, I'm not going to do this. And he turns around and stands up to them. And I thought that scene was just so great. Yeah. So excellent acting job.
Yeah. Nathan, what about you? Hidden gem.
The props department.
Yes.
Every little bit of this movie.
Oh, wonderful choice.
From the overly full house brimming with inventions to the subway station that is practically alive and sentient, and they walk through it and have all these great gadgets and tricks, to the physical humor that was built into a lot of these scenes that was based on and reliant on these props being so good. I just love them. Especially the winner for me goes of non-sentient props, let's say, to the subway sidecar. That was just such a hilarious idea.
Yes, it was good. That's a great choice. I love it. I'm gonna go with Michael Wayans, who is young Daryl and is the son of Damon Wayans. Because my wife will sit there and say, like, I have like this strange pet peeve of like young actors not being even anywhere in the vicinity of the physical description of what like their adult versions are. And I even sat there and go like on the second time through, because I hadn't done my homework too closely on this yet, so I did sit there and I go like, man, see, they got good kids for this movie. Well, they actually were the kids of the actual actor. So perfect way to get a good young actress to have your son play you. So I love that. So recast. If you had to recast somebody and put somebody else in their place, even though we've talked about this being a pretty strong cast, who would you recast, Ricky?
That is tough, but I mean, if I were to recast anyone, and this is also doubling as my pitch for the modern adaptation of Blankman, The Rise of Other Guy, Damon Wayans Jr. To replace Damon Wayans. I think that he is so he has the same physical comedy chops that his dad does. I loved him in Happy Endings. And he just is always willing to just take it to the nth degree. And if you haven't seen Let's Be Cops, he's great in that movie as well. But yeah, Damon Wayans Jr. for me, for sure.
Yeah, I kind of set you up on that one. Nathan, recast.
Well, I kind of hate to do this a little bit because we've talked about how great some of this acting is, but unfortunately, I think one of the things that held this movie back is name recognition. So just imagine if this movie had someone like a Will Smith attached to it I'm not sure if the best place is the Kevin or the Daryl role, but I do feel like that might have pushed this over the top.
Kevin, he'd be a good straight man because like in Bad Boys, he's the straight man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I will say there is a part of me that wants to see the Daryl performance a little bit modified because, like I've been talking about earlier, it's a little bit hard to tell sometimes exactly what is fully parody and what is actually like a really touching mental health sketch, because I think that it toes that line in a way which I kind of would appreciate one more take to make it feel like this character is a little bit more clear which direction it is. So that's my note there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you are going to sell more tickets that way. That's for sure. My recast is going to be a smaller character. Sometimes I cop out and I go down the cast list when I like the cast so much, but Daryl has a boss, Mr. Crud, who's like a really southern, effeminate man who's just really over the top. And I don't know that, like, I think going that big on that small of a character was a weird choice. I do want to get somebody who does a good slow burn, and a younger Ben Stiller at the time would have been somebody who would have been peeved and perturbed with him on the job without being so, I don't know, too much is a better word for it. So I want to see Ben Stiller getting frustrated with him being like, Daryl.
Yeah, I had a random idea. You brought up Ben Stiller, and that immediately made me think of Mystery Men.
Yes.
I made, on the podcast we talk about headcanon, I think that this just exists in that same universe. And that this is just a prequel to Mystery Men.
Oh, I'm glad you brought Mystery Men up. That's another underappreciated movie, by the way.
Oh yeah, for sure. Anyway, I
don't know if that one's too new for that. Should be done on your show at some point.
Oh, we have done it. That's why it's so fresh in my mind. I'm just like, wait a second, because I think we did it when the Justice League came out.
Okay,
and
perfect.
So we're like, wait a second, another superhero team up, Mystery Men.
That's another good parallel here. Now, best shot, Ricky.
Best shot, I mean, for me, it's the moment where the crowd is chanting for Blankman, and he's walking like to the bank, and the whole crowd is behind him chanting, and he's just like, okay, they're expecting you to solve something, and you don't know what you're doing. I'm just like, I I feel this.
He feels small in that
He feels
moment.
so. It was just such an honest little moment, and also again, like that's one of my favorite moments in the movie because like it actually brings about like the reality of just like being a hero is more than just like stopping a couple of crimes. Just like when the city is like expecting you to like solve all their problems and you don't know how to, it's just like, what are you gonna do? And so I just really, I think that shot was just really powerful and showed like the stakes of that moment.
That's a wonderful pick. I could see that being on the back of the box.
Yeah.
Nathan, what about you? What's your best shot?
I'm going to go with the entry to the subway station with Kimberly and Daryl when they get in, and it's just this wonderful, almost approaching Blade Runner levels of neon and grunge, and everything's whirring and speaking and beeping around them, and she's just totally blown away, and so is the audience.
My best shot is going to be the elevator forced perspective, where the camera shot is looking up like you have no clue how far this elevator is, and they really milk this fishing line grappling hook, as Nathan mentioned earlier. He touched on this one a little bit earlier, but then the camera relatively wisely, this is a good move by the director, and then it switches angle and just shows Kevin like hopping down 12 inches, and there's no need for this gadget whatsoever. Yes. And the comedy of the gadget, the excessiveness of this character and everything, clever perspective work on the camera there that make you think it's a long way down and then changed greatly. So I love it when the camera work makes you laugh. That's hard to do actually as a director. So that's going to be my best shot because the director himself made me laugh on this one. Yeah. So, best scene, Ricky.
I mean, I said it before. It's J5 just getting
coming to
that
rescue.
Whole rescue moment with J5 is just the best scene for me. It is so hilarious. And so I went back and watched the movie trailer. They give that moment away in the trailer, which that's one of my biggest pet peeves is when you give away like one of the funniest comedic moments in this movie in the trailer. But yeah, that whole scene of the rescue mission that J5 goes on is my favorite scene.
Great choice there. Now, Nathan, what is your best scene?
The subway sidecar scene. So just backing up a little bit, he's driving up. You're wondering if he's going to be late. Is the thing going to break down? It's sparking all over the place. Who knows? She's looking around the platform. There he is, the hero himself. Everything's just so perfectly put together to make you believe that she would fall for this person because she's never really talked to him or encountered his real personality. She's seeing the perfect side of him. Everything turns out to work. Everything goes right just this one time. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great choice. And by the way, that was a consideration for my best shot with the camera that they had angled down there and there was a little bit of shaking and stuff like that. Like, I actually dug the front perspective of that too. So that's a really good choice as well. My best scene is going to be when Kevin gets shot and Daryl has to step up and be the superhero, and all of that whole thing of the warehouse. You know, the nunchucks, the electric nunchucks are so hilarious. I'm actually laughing really hard at how crappy people are just walking into the nunchucks and getting taken out by them. I mean, it's campy. They actually put in the Bam Biff Pow Zap like renderings from the Adam West Batman. But this to me is the movie is clicking in high gear at this point, and this is my best scene. So
they're knocking it over a bunch of what are really foam pool noodles on people's heads.
Yeah. Everything about this, I love the gadgetry, and so the gadgetry is in high form on this one too. And it's all wrapped up by pushing him out the 20 doors for some reason. The rocket rollerblades are a great finish on this one. So, and I did sit there and go like, "There's no building that has this many vestibules."
Was this a convention center?
Yeah, great, just little bit of cutting editing work there.
Best wardrobe moment, because we did mention this thing. What is the best piece of wardrobe in this, Ricky?
Oh, there's so many I gotta give it to Michigan State. That
the non-bulletproof Michigan State sweater.
non-bulletproof Michigan State sweater, because that whole moment of like, oh yeah, he has some household stuff, and even like his whole wardrobe, like, okay, yeah, he has like underalls and rubber gloves, and I think his grandmother's old like dress or robe, like all those other things. But he literally just went into his closet. It's just like Michigan State and this as the cape, and then he just grabbed his actual like gym clothes, and I just love that attention to detail. So for me, it's Michigan State.
Great. Nathan, is it going to be a pair of fork glasses, or what is it going to be?
You know, it's actually not. It's associated with one of the funniest lines I have in the movie. Only a real man can rob a bank in satin. When Minnelli pops up out of the sewers and it's like, anybody can rob a bank. And he's just wearing this absolutely ridiculous wardrobe. And at that point in the movie, I realized this is a movie where in Batman, there's this whole concept of Batman has inspired people to become comic book villains. In this, Minnelli already was a little bit of a comic book villain, and Blankman has inspired him to take the wardrobe parts as silly as he wants it to go.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So my best wardrobe moment's definitely going to be the mask that Damon Wayans wears as Blankman. It's just, it's on his face, and it still leaves enough room for him to like express himself and do all the acting that he needs to do. He's deliciously campy, and it's just, it's a towel with eye holes cut out into it, and that's all it is. So.
Yep.
My change one thing, Ricky.
Ooh, change one thing. I would change, and there's no real reason for this, so just know that I would change this to being a 70s movie. That would be my only change, is that
everything's funnier in the 70s. The styles, the leisure suits, and the hair. I mean, sure. Like I think I'm just gonna get more laughs out of that. I'm buying.
Because what I want to happen as a byproduct is that they actually meet. I mean, of course, this is, we're talking modern times, but the late great Adam West. I would have loved for an Adam West appearance to happen in the 70s while Batman is on, while all of this other stuff is happening, and that.
He probably would do that too.
I just like
I
just think that
he comes on Family Guy to do Mayor Adam West.
So
I bet you could do that. I bet you could get him in there.
I just think that would have been the thing to do. So if when they were making this movie, it was set in the 70s, and they were just like, can we get Adam West, please? He doesn't even have to be.
You're making me what?
He doesn't even have to be in the bat suit. Just get real life Adam West just to show up, and I just think that would have been a great moment.
You're making me really want a Blankman edition of WandaVision, where it's like a whole bunch of eras, and they've trapped themselves in this fictional world of various eras of television superhero comedies.
I'm here for it. You let me know when you launch that Kickstarter, and I will be your first supporter.
Nathan, change one thing.
All right. I think that Kevin's character is really close, just one fairly minor change away from being just super interesting and deep in a way that would make this really interesting movie. I mentioned earlier that I thought the mob was a little bit removed from the origins of this movie, that it didn't come out of left field or anything, but it feels like there could be a little bit more connectivity to it, and I feel like it would be really awesome if Kevin knew that his boss, Mr. Stone, was involved with or likely to rat something he knew to the mob, and that it was made obvious at some point that he was up between a rock and a hard place in those decisions he's making early on, where Daryl is driving him up the wall with the early phases of this experimentation, and at the same time, Kevin is really trying to make it at this journalism job. I thought it would be really interesting if it felt like Kevin was maybe considering some other route and had a little bit more inner conflict with that. That would have made for a very interesting bit of character growth for me.
Wow, that's a lot of complexity to add to this.
I like it.
Yeah. You might be well suited for the headcanon portion of the Flashback Flicks show on that. That was ambitious. Yeah.
We love it.
Might change one thing. Is going to just simply be, I do want a few moments of warmth between Daryl and Kevin. They are brothers. He looks after him. And while he's super frustrated with him and everything bad happens to Kevin and it's hilarious, I do think, like there was a moment where they had a funeral for the grandmother and stuff like that. And, it was Damon crying in the most cartoonish way. This is one moment where I thought Mike Bender probably should have been like, it's okay to have some moments of heart. We need to like these characters. And it's okay for him to actually be crying and have Daryl actually just put his arm around his shoulder and be like, it's just us now. We got each other and I'll take care of you kind of thing. And that's all you really need to do. And honestly, like it's a small thing, but it just shows how much these characters love each other and why, basically Kevin puts up with Daryl, even though he drives him absolutely nuts all the time. Yeah. So go ahead, go ahead, hit me in the sweet spot there a little bit. So I'm a softie. I need that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, go for it.
Best quote of the movie, and of which there are many.
Of which there are
Ricky.
many.
Oh man. Okay, man. Does the sound of J5 falling down the flight of stairs count as a quote? No, I would say slap me around and call me Susan. I think
it's good.
Favorite quote followed by the proceedings of the quote.
That's a good one. Nathan, what about you?
The scene where Daryl has to turn off all the robots in the subway and J5 makes a sad noise and Daryl says, "Don't make this harder than it already is." And at that moment, you understand the humanity that is being lost here in J5.
Yes. There are so many, and we might have, you can have a runner-up too if you need to on this one, but I really like the part where Blankman, or I should say Daryl, has come home and he's talking to Kevin. He said, "You know that feeling when somebody kisses you? Like, that was like a buddy kiss, right? Yeah, probably right. I didn't like all that tongue probing around my mouth anyway."
Yes.
And watching Kevin crushed. Yeah. That like, how is this happening?
Oh man, so good.
Oh man.
I did really enjoy it, and I just had a couple of runner-ups, though. I enjoyed I have to make this world safer for my children. Your children? You gotta be with a woman first before you can have children. You're a virgin. I'm a gentleman.
Gentleman.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, I'm a gentleman.
We did it, other guy.
Somebody should help that lady. Is still pretty high up there.
Yeah, shoot him in the face. Just the onlookers like, try shooting him in the head. Yeah, shoot him in the head.
That was well delivered, you're right. It sounded pretty much like that. Yeah. Even just small stuff, like David Allen Greer at one point is like working and like Jason Alexander says, "That a boy?" And he goes, "Boy? I'm a man. What? Nothing." No, it's so many good lines, and that's one of the things I said it rewatches really well. So now, this is the time before we go and rate this. Ricky, do you want to tell people where they can hear more from you?
Absolutely. You can hear more from me and my co-host Grayson on the Flashback Flicks Retro Movie Podcast. What we do is a lot of things here. We watch older movies and then we have conversations, share childhood memories, and come up with inventive new ways to imagine this movie that is from the past. It's a lot of fun and we love to have you over there.
It's a fun show. I mean, you guys have great chemistry. I really enjoy listening to both of you guys on that one. So, and like I said, the library is robust. So I promise you will find a movie that you either vaguely remember and then have a fun stroll down memory lane, or you might find a movie just like, hey, I love this movie. I forgot this existed. So it's so good for that.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, on a 5-star scale, half-star intervals, Ricky, what do you give Blankman?
I have to give Blankman, I'm going to give it 4.5. And it's because of how strongly it was written, and to see all of the other movies that came out after it that was basically the same movie. Like when I start realizing, like, wait a second, this has some undertones and themes that The Dark Knight has. And I'm like, this is a solid movie, and it's not because it didn't take itself too seriously. Like I think that it's a fun and interesting story, and definitely a different type of superhero story that I think is worth telling and experiencing, and it is just so funny. While all being grounded in a reality where stakes are real and people actually die, and it's not just a cartoon world. It is a heightened reality with some more comedic elements in it, and that's why I give it the 4.5. I would give it a full 5 if it just cleans up its act a little bit. Just largely content and things that hasn't aged well, but that's no fault of its own, because it is a product of its time.
Comedy is more apt at stepping in it than other genres.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're going to be edgy, there's a high likelihood some percentage of what you're doing probably won't age well, and that's of its time. So just know that when you watch it. I'm okay with that as far as comedy goes. So now, Nathan, what would you rank Blankman on a 5-star scale?
Blankman for me gets a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that this movie is really fun to watch, really entertaining, really well made. I love the care that goes into it. The one reason I take a one star off is just because I feel like there's potential for just a little bit more clarity and character development in which direction this wants to be, whether it wants to be that full-on parody or continue dealing with some of those issues that it raises and is really good at talking about at times.
I'm going to mirror a lot of the things you said. I'm going to give it a 4. And I think that it can steer a hair more into the parody at times by like the density of jokes. A good parody movie, such as like a movie like Airplane, just has all of these things going, and they use the background. People that aren't even part of the movie, sometimes like you use the background to layer in more jokes and stuff like that. What's happening in the neighborhood, what the mobsters are doing. Maybe you have a heavier handed henchman of Minnelli. You know what I mean? So there's an opportunity to steer more into the parody bucket, or if it wants to stay where it is. I still think adding some more, and this is probably more the direction that I would go in. Use the characters that are really likable and just make us really like them, and the comedy level is actually probably pretty appropriate for that. So I'm thinking something more like a Home Alone's a very good example of this, where like it touches me, it makes me laugh, and therefore it becomes timeless. So that's probably the only thing that's keeping this from going there. So one of those two, I'm with you, Nathan. Pick a path, and you'll probably find your way to a 5-star for me. So
yeah.
So I'm going to go with a 4. We have balanced the 19% to Rotten Tomatoes rating.
Perfect.
We've brought balance to the world.
Yeah.
Now, Nathan, will you help me pick a movie for next time?
Let's do it, Russell.
All right. We're going back to the 80s. Option number 1, Tootsie. Michael Dorsey, an unsuccessful actor, disguises himself as a woman in order to get a role on a trashy hospital soap. Option 2, Working Girl from 1988. When a secretary's idea is stolen by her boss, she seizes the opportunity to steal it back by pretending has her boss's job. Option 3, Broadcast News from 1987. Take 2 rival television reporters, one handsome, one talented, both male. Add 1 producer, female. Well, mix and watch the sparks fly. What'll it be, Nathan?
Well, Russell, lots of great sounding choices there. I think we're going to have to go with 1988's Working Girl.
All right, sounds great. Look forward to that one. And Ricky, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun, and thank you for allowing me to fall back in love with Blankman. Like I'm gonna go real deep in trying to find as much memorabilia for this movie as I can, or make my own. So thank you.
No, it was a great pick. We had a lot of fun with you, and we'd love to have you back again someday.
I'd love to be back.
All right. Remember, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, we invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us at Twitter on @movie_retro. We're on Instagram. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. We have a Patreon site if you would like to support us. And as always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Nathan?
I hate to disappoint you, but my rubber lips are immune to your charms.